Hello, my name is Caroline Hayes, and I'm here with the artist Jack Sommerville to discuss his upcoming solo show at Stallmann in Berlin. In this video, I'll be asking Jack a few questions about both his life and his work, followed by a quick tour of the studio. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. I wanted to start with the basics of the show. So could you describe your upcoming exhibition at Stallmann?
Oh. Well, it's made up of my most recent work that probably have to explain my work, which I don't like doing. Yeah, I mean, recently, because I've just moved to this big old house, and it was before that, I just became really, really bored with pretty much anything that was associated with or reminded me of art school in any way, and I fled from it, and I don't really know. A lot changed. This obviously means nothing to people who haven't seen my work before. I guess maybe this question is better answered at the end when I'm showing you some of the paintings.
All right. Why don't you like talking about your work too much normally?
Well, no one ever likes hearing it with anyone. People just kind of suck it up and bear it whilst it's happening. No one likes it. Everyone finds it boring because it's not useful in any way that is of real value. It's just like regular old small talk. It's not. I mean, you're not gonna. Nobody's ever gonna substitute any of that talk with seeing the work, are they?
No. Yeah, I could see that.
Ever. It's just boring. It's just really, really boring, and everyone cringes when everyone does it. And I think it's just a waste of time.
So then maybe let's talk about sort of your transition from art school into your new studio. So you graduated from Central St. Martin's in London, and you're currently working out of a studio in rural France. What specifically prompted that move?
Well, property prices here are very, very, very cheap. Ridiculous, as in not funny cheap. Very, very depressingly cheap. As in, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of properties of domestic properties lying in absolute ruin all the way across the French countryside. It's so strange. Some of them have earth floors and that only just recently been moved out of. So the cost was a big thing. Also, I seem to have gotten out at the right time for my own personal convenience in terms of leaving Britain. Mm-hmm. Also, there's something about Britain now that it's like the whole island is, not the whole island, but there's an aura about it, which is a kind of like penitentiary. Everyone has sort of begun to, obviously not everyone, but a huge amount of people have just started being absolutely okay with letting themselves be floated away by the schedule that's written for them, like you have at school. Mm-hmm. Or in the prison system. And it makes people fucking weird. and I just don't like being there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
This is a nice, sleepy, very ancient town in rural France, and people are just sort of normal. There isn't this constant hysteria when you bump into someone on the street, and fear, and I don't know.
So then do you think it sort of changes the way that your art is produced, in like the way that you're sort of perceiving other people and your own self?
Yeah. Well, because when I moved out of London, I was in a quiet town there, and it changed my work a lot. I went from making pretty generic art student abstract painting to something that I think is pretty compelling, and is definitely not earth-shaking, which it shouldn't be, and it can't be. Nothing ever can be. It's only ever hysteria that says it is. It's just sort of humble and charming.
Like the town, sort of.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, my studio now, because I'm sitting by the window, I'm looking down on the road. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a tree fort. There's a little box that's raised up like a treehouse, and I look at these paintings, and I thought, if you were young enough and you were into contemporary art, and you had a treehouse in your garden, you'd probably want to fill that treehouse with art, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. I thought that's quite a nice way of approaching a painting. Is one that you're going to put up in your treehouse if you're a little kid.
So do you miss anything from London, or at least just being in a big city?
Yeah, I miss my friends.
Yeah.
That's it. That's pretty much it. Yeah. I went back and I just didn't like being there. I really just wanted to leave immediately. Mm-hmm. It's yeah, don't want to get into that. That's a huge conversation. But
yeah. Do you think you're going to stay in this location, or are you going to explore other, small town locations in the future?
No, I'll be here for a while, I think. I'll definitely have a studio here for a long time, because it's like this. Also, who knows? Who knows? But I'm happy here, and it's very comfortable here. Mm-hmm. And it's out of the way, and you get left alone. So I've got no reason to move. I've got no reason to be urgent about anything, hysterical about anything. Yeah.
And how would you say this sort of change of locations has influenced or sort of affected this new collection of works that you're showcasing?
Well, most of them. Is it most of them? No, the biggest piece, the biggest ones are ones that I made in England. Mm-hmm. They're the big rain paintings, and then the smaller stuff are this stuff I made here. There is a kind of there is a difference. There is quite I haven't really thought about that. What I've made here has been, I always had this theatrical thing. I always had this theatrical way way of making the pictures. They're not, I don't know how to say, you know, because the big rain paintings, they really are backdrops they really are kind of scenic backdrops for something or other. But it's like there's a whole, you know, there's a whole theatre around me, around my life, and the fact that I do this, and they are sort of backdrops to that life, but the new ones are much more of a kind of production in themselves. They're, you know, you could describe them as each one as a little verse of something, but the rain more they're just rain, and they're still my favorite ones, because what I've done here has been something like that. It's like, imagine if I took a piece of creation, a piece of the a cloud bursting, which is already a perfect thing, and I try and like put a little trinket on it. That trinket, that piece of compositional tact that I have tried to claim, or might have tried to claim, improves this image, doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why I would have done that in France. And I was all right to just leave it with the rain in England. But, who knows?
I noticed that you referred to your paintings as verses. Does that sort of connotation of verse as sort of very poetic and extracts of a larger piece show how you aim to communicate?
I don't aim to communicate in any way. I don't aim, I don't plan a mode of address. I mean, most of these images that I make, they literally just appear in my head at some point. Yeah. And then I'm as in their entirety, they appear in, and yeah, I mean, there's bound to be people that just don't believe that ever happens, but that's what they, yeah. I mean, I'll hear something or I'll see something, and then the entire image will come into my head. And I'll make it, so I'll write it down and I'll make it as soon as possible. Because the faster you act, the more of that image that you got in your head you can capture.
And several of your portraits, like the one that you're sitting in front of right now, feature that sort of motif of rain falling from a single cloud. Could you elaborate on that? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, to me, it's just rain. If I try and imbue it with something, it's just a trinket. It's just a piece of tack. Like these aren't as good as standing under a cloud bursting in real weather. Right. No painting is as good as that. And everyone knows that. There are certain things that we like. It's not even part of the same question, but they're different things. But I mean, the rain, a cloud bursting. I mean, I'm aware of the very many different ways of interpreting it, especially now.
Mhm.
Clouds bursting, a watershed moment. I mean, that yeah, okay, you can
Or the sort
kind
of biblical sense behind water as well, like water as rebirth.
the flood
Yeah.
is coming. Yeah, whoever wants to instill fear into some guilt-ridden people
Mhm.
can always do that with anyone from anything. But like it is just there was a period, there was a time in England when I was there where there were constant cloudbursts,
Mhm.
and it was this. Oh no, actually, it was on the way. It was when I came to France to look at this place before it was bought. That's when it was. That's interesting. And there's this kind of this feeling of there is this feeling of absolution when you get hit with one. This sudden, when you have a very sudden one, and it's very heavy. There is this sort of washing away or restarting or absolution. Don't want to talk about resets, but there's just something very pure about very, very uncomplicated and very, very compelling about that happening. What better subject matter could I use? And then I basically just carried on using it, and I'm still just using it until it's run out. Obviously, the rain will never run out, but my capacity to play with it might. I mean, I don't see it happening soon, but also I see myself getting bored of it sooner than it runs out. I might just go outside and then a cloud will burst, and I'll realize how futile it is trying to portray it on a piece of cloth.
On first glance, at least digitally, most of the recent works that you've produced, they sort of appear as just like paint on canvas, but then you look just closer and you see that they're made up of really distinct materials. For example, the painting behind you, I think you said it was stained glass paint and a sort of linen sack, and then another one is velvet. So what material considerations do you take when you're developing these pieces?
Yeah, well, so this one, the green is cotton, and the sack is hessian. The white is oil, and the blue is stained glass paint. The sack I found here. Yeah, the sack. I mean, it is just very charming. And it is very poetic, but it's very childish poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it's got the eloquence of a child that grown-ups don't have. But yeah, a lot of it is just what I find. A lot of it is just I have things. But the fact that I use velvet a lot is well, I used it once, and then the way that the paint sat on it was just completely magical. You know how when you brush velvet, the color changes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when you put paint on it, the color beneath the paint changes as well. So it makes this really. I don't know how to explain the visual effect, but it's it's really amazing. But also, yeah, I like the poetry. I like the poetry of the fact that they're all sun-bleached velvet. Because I buy old antique velvet curtains, which have obviously been hanging for a long time, and that hanging gives them a pattern from where the sunlight's hit them. It's all just very nice. It's all just very lovely. You know, oil paint on Hessian and sun-bleached velvet. That's obviously going to be very, very nice to look at.
Mm-hmm.
You just know, you know, it's obviously going to be nice and lovely, and it is. And there's no meaningless adornery on it. It's just it's something you just really like to live with, because I have to live with them. And if you, I don't know what, you know, that we always come back to that about your works living in your work paintings living in people's houses. But I mean, really, what better test could there be than somebody bringing that thing that you've made into their home? And you'd have to really love something to do that.
Yeah. When you're talking about like yourself and your art, you seem to be actively practicing restraint and humility, both in the way that you describe the pieces, but also in the way that you want the pieces to come across. Like you say, they're not as good as the real thing, in terms of, like, you know, the cloudburst or something. So in contrast, what status do you think humility has in like the broader general artistic production today?
Oh, well, the broader general artistic production.
Yeah.
That's just people doing stuff. It's no. The question is where does humility? What's the place of humility in life? Because there's no distinction from life, between life and making art. Like you can't have humility in making art if you're not a humble person.
Right.
It's just, so you need to work on yourself as a man or as a woman. Humility is endless. I mean, yeah. Be humble. Be grateful. Trust me when I say that. I mean, there's a whole generation of people learning how to be their own fathers now. And the more of this kind of fatherly wisdom that you give people, the more they seem to want to be around you. Yeah, a lot of people. Anyway, be humble. Obviously, be humble. That's all you can really say. It will only benefit you to be humble.
And so I think that sort of ties in with the way that you communicate as well. It's really calculated and minimal, I would say. But with that, there comes a range of interpretations that might come from, you know, the lack of really definitive communication. So how do you feel about the different ways that people may come to understand you and your work that might not necessarily align with the way that you see it?
I've got no idea how people will see my work. That's part of the fun. I mean, I think that's the way that that these pictures can't speak for the quote unquote real thing is the same as me speaking for the paintings.
Yeah.
Like this is what was so irritating at art school. There's just these absolute obviousnesses that that nobody has the humility to say. Like a painting is not, or for example, somebody would make a virtual space of a show, and they would still just keep pretending completely that they're looking at paintings, when you're obviously not. You're looking at photographs of painting. Mm-hmm. Obviously, like that's a boring topic, but it's a different thing you're looking at. What I say, is literally only as valuable as what you say about it, because it's just description. Like, it's not. I don't even really know how to approach the question anymore, because they're just obviously different things. You know that, I know that, everyone knows that. So just come and look at them instead of kind of getting off on these little descriptions that you need so badly, because, not you, Caroline, but these little descriptions that you need because you need some sort of thing to say when you meet that important person next time.
Yeah.
Like, do you enjoy art or not? Like, which seems like a basic childhood kind of socialization thing, is saying what you think honestly. That seems like a pretty basic thing that you should learn as a child, which not a lot, there's a lot of very, very weird ways of socializing in this business.
Who has informed your work in terms of, applying your artistic practice?
This recent work, I really don't know if I can say that it's been informed by anyone from a conscious, out of conscious effort. Mm-hmm. I'm realizing that, I mentioned with Matisse before.
Yeah.
I remember I went to the Matisse Museum, and it was so amazing. It was my favorite. It's my favorite museum ever. There's all that stained glass in there, and I'm thinking about making stained glass. I find myself converging on a lot of Matisse areas. But I don't know. I mean, Julian Schnabel. It's hard not to be influenced by Julian Schnabel now. When you're making large-scale pictures. Mm-hmm. And I think he really is great. And I think that's why he gets so much criticism. But I get, I mean, I must have been, but I really don't think I think I just don't keep track of that. I mean, there's so many artists that I look at. Maybe El Greco in a weird way. But that, again, could be seen as the same thing that could come from Matisse. Yeah, I'm not really sure.
The exhibition at Stallmann is going to be your first solo show, and you've had a close relationship with the development of the gallery as well. Lena Stallmann has described your show as sort of a revelation of the direction that the gallery is going in. How do you feel about its upcoming?
I agree with Lena. I'll usually agree with Lena. She's so I need to go into a different room.
No worries.
She's really cool. Lena has this very similar understanding of why being like a child is the best thing you can do when you're trying to extract cultural goods. She understands that the way that the kind of childlike way of thinking is a way of being that is just sort of only humble. It's not about you anymore. It's about the play, and it's about the produce. It's about the fun of the experience, which you don't get if you're thinking about what a special little boy you are all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a little kid playing with your friends, you're not thinking about yourself. You're thinking about monster trucks or doing the biggest jump you can on your bike, or it's never about you. It's about the thing you're making. And once you get rid of the ego out of it all and your social obligations to creating clever lines, then you start making good stuff. And then you can have fun and not be enacting your entire career in fear, because you're beholden to these weird social nets that you've built for yourself. But she really gets that. And I've gone really, really far away from the question, which I would like you to remind me of.
It's how you feel about its upcoming opening, but I would say you've answered it and then sort of gone into the overall vision of the gallery as well.
Yeah, well, I can't speak for the overall vision of the gallery, but I think I could. If I was to guess, then I'd say it was pretty much something like that.
Yeah. And what do you think that your specific exhibition will communicate to its visitors?
I think you know how I'm going to answer this, Caroline. I think obviously I have no idea. Okay. I don't have the mind control capabilities that the conceptual artists claim to have, which they don't really have. But I think there'd be, I'd hope, actually, let's say that. I'd hope that there's a sense of humility and a sense of unpretension. And hopefully a sort of realness and a return to, I'm falling into that meaningless language again. I think that there'll be things there that you'll enjoy looking at, and I think that if you on if you're still on the hyper cold conceptual bandwagon, that you might just be charmed a little bit and not know why.
That's great. I think on that note, that's probably a good way to conclude the sort of Q&A session. I want to thank you just for talking to me. I think it's really interesting because you get a much more closer perspective into who you are and then how that relates to your work. Something that I think you would agree is a lot more valuable than just sort of this like lifeless press release. So I think it would also be valuable if your iPad is charged enough to get a quick look at the space that you're sort of making your work in.
Okay. So I was painting it all last night or yesterday. Let's turn this around. Okay, so
Wow.
This is the space, studio space. A lot of painting to do. Still got a bit up there to do. Stick everything on the table. I've got to scrub the whole floor with a brush by hand. Yeah, so there's a window. That's the window with no window on it. Here's a couple of the clouds bursting. I've put these out especially for you. There's that one. There's that one. There's that one. And there's one that's unfinished. But yeah, is that?
Yeah, I think it's good. I'm seeing the sort of scale of the paintings. I know you've mentioned the dimensions a few times, but you know, seeing them obviously in the context of the space. Why do you choose to have such large paintings?
Well, these, you can stand under the rain.
Right.
You can, you know, you can also when they're this big, then you're little in comparison.
Yeah.
So, you know, children are little. The fact that everything's big is, I think is important.
Mm-hmm.
I think is important for the feeling that you have when you're a child, which obviously then, of course, is part of the selflessness that children have, because they're small, and it's not about them. But yeah, it's as simple as you can stand under the rain now because they're big. I've got a lot. I was raised in the backstage of opera theatres because my parents were in that business, and I always find myself making things that are like scenic painting. So imagine this as a sort of pantomime piece of scenic paneling.
Mm-hmm.
There's some scene in which it is raining, so they make a panel of rain to put there so that the audience can see that it's raining.
Yeah.
But imagine that as a little kid making things in his treehouse in the garden, and I think you're pretty close to what I'm doing.
I think that's all for this video. So thank you once again for taking the time out to do this with me. very excited to actually see the works, digitally or in person, who knows, at Stallmann in the coming months, hopefully.
If we're allowed to go.
Yeah. Are you're I'm assuming you're planning to go to Berlin.
Yeah, if some people in some box somewhere say I can, yeah.
Okay, so I'll leave you with that. I think that'll be good.
Great.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Hopefully I'll see you in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.